الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعد نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. فالحمد لله this is the third reading from the book شرح أصول اعتقاد أهل السنة والجماعة شرح أصول اعتقاد أهل السنة والجماعة by Al-Imam Abu al-Qasim al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah ta'ala. The Imam Abu al-Qasim Hibatullah ibn al-Hasan ibn Mansur al-Lalaka'i, who died in the year 418 after the Hijrah. And this book, as we said, the explanation of the fundamentals of the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. We mentioned in the last reading the author's introduction, or in the first reading we mentioned the author's praising of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what it contained from the various benefits. And then we went into the introduction of the author, the portion that kind of laid down for us the fundamentals of the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, i.e. that which the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah is built upon. And we said the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah is built upon Kitab Allah wa Sunnati Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa as-Sahaba, yani tariqat as-Sahaba, the way of the Sahaba, minhaj as-Sahaba, fahm as-Sahaba, all of these things being synonyms, the path of the Sahaba, the understanding of the Sahaba, the methodology of the Sahaba. And then fourthly we said a tamassuk biha, holding fast to those things, the way of the Sahaba, and holding fast to those things. The way of the Sahaba, ثم ما أجمع عليه السلف الصالحون. So the Quran, the Sunnah, the way of the Sahaba, and that which was unanimously agreed upon from the way, or from the Salaf as-Salihun, from the pious predecessors, holding fast to all of that and being established on it until death, as well as avoiding innovation and listening to the people of misguidance. And we said these were the fundamentals that the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah is built upon: Quran, Kitab Allah al-Mubin, wa Sunnati Rasulih sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa Fahm al-Sahabati al-Akhyar al-Muttaqeen, the book of Allah that is clear and clarifying, and the Sunnah of the Messenger, or the statement of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the Sahaba who have been chosen and their piety is established. And then that which was agreed upon or unanimously determined by, or that which they came together upon, the Salaf as-Salihun, that which united the Salaf as-Salihun, as well as holding fast to all of that and being upon that until death. And then he mentioned that which is a necessary abandonment, which is the abandonment, the avoiding of the people of innovation, and even not just avoiding doing the innovation itself, or not the people of innovation, avoiding innovation, ijtinab al-bid'ah, avoiding innovation, as well as not even listening to the people of innovation, not giving them an ability over yourself by paying attention or concerning yourself or listening to or engaging with that which they present from the innovation. So we said these were the fundamentals of the Aqidah, i.e. that which the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah was built upon. And then the author, he talked about how this was what was inherited and passed on, and it was the methodology and it was the way of all of those pious generations, from the Sahaba to the Tabi'un to the Atba' al-Tabi'un, or to the Atba' al-Tabi'in. And like this, they inherited it one after the other. And their pathway was the pathway that reached the goal. And their way was the way that was established and successful. And like this, we finished, and their friendship was the friendship that was valuable. And like this, we finished the section that we covered last time. After establishing all of that, the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he goes into the results of those who follow a pathway other than that. I'm sorry, before that, he goes into uh, the results of those who follow this pathway. If this is the fundamentals, and this is how the fundamentals were utilized in those generations that we talked about, if those 8 things that we mentioned were the fundamentals of Ahl Sunnah, Quran, Sunnah, Sahaba, way of the Salaf, holding fast on it, dying upon it, avoiding innovation, and engaging with the people of innovation. What is that? 7. Quran, Sunnah, Sahaba, Salaf, holding fast to it, dying upon it. That's 6. Avoiding innovation and not engaging with the people of innovation. That is 8. So like I said, those 8 things that we mentioned, if those are what our Aqidah is based on and our religion in totality is based on that, and then we mentioned what the author talked about how the Salaf from those 3 generations utilized these things, how they passed it on one to another, and how they traveled down this path, and how they used it as the evidence and were victorious because of it, and how they clarified the truth, and how they established the Aqidah. And like that, all of those generations from the Qurun al-Mufaddala to the generations of the A'immat al-Arba'ah and those who were contemporaries to them and slightly thereafter, like the generation of Imam Ahmed and the generations of Imam al-Bukhari and Muslim and Tirmidhi, and like this, the Usur, al-Awail, or the first generations. If this is the fundamentals and this is what they utilized, then what was the result? What was the result that they accomplished? And what was the result of those who opposed them or turned away from their way? Because if this is the fundamentals, you have those who followed them in these fundamentals and what happened to them. And you also have those who opposed them in these fundamentals. So what was their result? And that's where we begin today with our reading. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, فمن أخذ في مثل هذه المحجة وداوم بهذه الحجج على منهاج الشريعة أمن في دينه التبعة في العاجلة والآجلة وتمسك بالعروة الوثقى التي لا انفصام لها واتقى بالجنة التي يتقى بمثلها ليتحصن بجملتها ويستعجل بركتها ويحمد عاقبتها في المعاد والمآل إن شاء الله. He says, so therefore whoever has taken or adopted this path, whoever has taken up this path and shown consistency upon this evidence according to the way of the Sharia, according to the path or the methodology, the minhaj of the Sharia being the legislation coming from that word, the pathway that leads to the watering hole, meaning that this is the path that leads to the source of our life. So whoever is consistent upon the evidence of this methodology of our religious legislation, amina fi dinihi at-tabi'a, he is safe as it relates to his religion, any bad or ill effect. Whether it be ajila or ajila, whether it be an ill effect that is hastened, i.e. occurring for him in this life, or ajila, postponed, one that would affect him in the life to come. And he says, and this is the individual, وَتَمَسَّكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى, and this is the individual who has held firm or who has grabbed a hold of that strong handhold, that there is no separation or no disconnection feared from it, right? You're not worried about slipping or falling off once you've grabbed onto it. وَاتَّقَى بِالْجُنَّةِ الَّتِي يُتَّقَى بِمِثْلِهَا, and he is the one who has shielded himself or protected himself with the shield, the likes of which one should protect themselves. لِيَتَحَصَّنَ بِجُمْلَتِهَا, in order that he could fortify himself with all of this. وَيَسْتَعْجِلَ بَرَكَتَهَا, and hasten the blessing of all of this for himself. وَيُحْمَدُ عَاقِبَتَهَا, or عَاقِبَتُهَا, now وَيُحْمَدُ أو وَيَحْمَدَ عَاقِبَتَهَا, and like this, his final result would be praise. وَيُحْمَدُ عَاقِبَتُهَا وَيَسْتَعْجِلَ بَرَكَتَهَا وَيُحْمَدُ عَاقِبَتُهَا. And like this, his final or the final result of it would be a praiseworthy result. فِي الْمَعَادِ وَالْمَآلِ إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ. Whether it be in the place that he is to return to, or the place that he is currently in, or ma'al would be the place that he goes back to, so it's a synonym, inshallah. I.e., what the author is saying here is that whoever adopts this way, then he is the one who is safe in his religion and firm in his religion. If you hope to acquire firmness in your religion, then upon you are these usul that we mentioned. There is no firmness in your religion without them. Often we find the Muslim, especially the new Shahada, and we're often concerned and worried about their establishment in the religion. Will they be able to continue on the path that Allah blessed them to begin upon when they accepted Islam? And the way that we can help ensure that with Allah's permission is that we establish in them these fundamentals. Because the individual who adopts these fundamentals and shows consistency in them, he doesn't abandon them after doing them for a while. We see a lot of times, sometimes our brothers who we saw when we were all young and we were all, had the zeal and the energy for the religion, after time passes and progresses with them, you find them starting to abandon some of these principles and starting to adopt some of the principles of others, whether it be the principles of nationality and race and supporting and building up of one race against another, whether it be the abandonment of the fundamentals of building the people up on Tawheed. These things we start to see after time passes. And this is what leads to the slippage in our religion. But instead, the individual who holds on to those fundamentals that we mentioned from the beginning and is consistent upon them, then this is the individual who the criticism or the evil effects that are in wait for us, he can feel safe from them in his religion. Innovation won't find a way to creep into him, nor will he have to worry about deviating from the path. And like this, he'll be firm and established in his religion. So he'll be able to be one who doesn't sway with the blowing of the wind and the changing of the environments. And this is something, as we said, especially for the new Shahada, this is something that we aspire to for them, that we instill in them these messages. And not just the new Shahada, but even the Muslim who has been a Muslim for a while and Allah has brought him back to his proper guidance, or was already on his proper guidance. These things are what keep us firm. And these are the things that protect us from the dangerous ill effects. This is what shields us from going astray. And this is what fortifies us and guards us and gives us that place of refuge when everyone else is left out in the cold, exposed to the evil environments. This is where we get our protection. And by doing all of this, we hasten the blessing that has been stored for us in the later life. And in the later life, the final result for us will be one that is praiseworthy, because being continuous upon this will arrive at the same place that the Salaf arrived at. And like this will be victorious and praiseworthy in this life, as well as in the life that we return to and go back to with Allah's permission. And that's the foundation that we ask Allah to keep us firm upon these things. Now, so this is the result for the one who adopts these fundamentals that we mentioned. Now, the author is going to talk about the things that contradict these fundamentals. The methods and the paths and the ideologies, or the foundations of the ideologies that contradict these fundamentals. If Quran, Sunnah, Sahaba, Salaf, holding fast, dying upon it, avoiding innovation and not engaging with its people, if these are our fundamentals, what are the fundamentals that the innovation is built upon? and what is the result of those who hold fast to those fundamentals and adopt that pathway. The author, he says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا وَابْتَغَى الْحَقَّ فِي غَيْرِهَا مِمَّا يَهْوَى أو يروم سواها مما تعداها أخطأ في اختيار بغيتي وأغواه وسلك به سبيل الضلالة وأرداه فيما هاوى الهلك فيما يعترض على كتاب الله وسنة رسوله بضرب الأمثال ودفعهما بأنواع المحال والحيد عنها بالقيل والقال مما لم ينزل الله به من سلطان ولا عرفه أهل التأويل واللسان ولا خطر على قلب عاقل بما يقتضيه من برهان ولا انشرح له صدر موحد عن فكر أو عيان فقد استحوذ عليه الشيطان وأحاط به الخذلان وأغواه بعصيان الرحمن حتى كابر نفسه بالزور والبهتان. He says, so whoever turns away from this path, and this is the first bad quality that we should be avoiding, turning away from this path in totality, rejecting it and abandoning it in totality, and seeking the truth. So whoever turns away from this path and seeks the truth and that which is other than it from what his desires wish, or from that which he has from desires. He seeks the truth and other than it from that which he is brought to by way of his desires, or he attempts to accomplish, or he attempts to reach, or has his sights set on something other than this, from the things that transgress this, that pass this boundary of the fundamentals that we mentioned, then he has made a mistake regarding what he has chosen as his goal. And this has misled him. And he has traversed the path of misguidance. And it has caused him to be debased in the pits of destruction. Regarding that which he has rejected or turned away from, as it pertains to the book of Allah and the sunnah of his messenger, by setting up comparisons or metaphors or similes, by setting up incorrect comparisons to the book of Allah and the messenger, and trying to reject the two of them with various types of impossibilities, and dodging the two of them or avoiding the two of them by using gossip or statements of so and so said and so and it was said by so and so and so and so. All of those things Allah hasn't sent, or any of those things, or all of those things being that which Allah has not sent down any authority for. All of those things being that which Allah has not sent down any authority for, nor was it known by the people of correct explanation and interpretation, or those who had accuracy in their language, or their tongue, their language. Nor was it something that came across the heart, or the thought, the intellect of any individual who possessed intellect, regarding that which is necessitated by the evidence. Nor was it something that you find the chest of the person who has accepted Tawheed and established Tawheed being comfortable with thinking about. Nor was it something is it something that they were be comfortable actually seeing in person, let alone thinking about it. And indeed, this type of individual is one who the shaitan has taken control of him, or taken advantage of him, and he has encompassed him with treachery and forsaking. And he has tricked him and misled him towards the obedience of Ar-Rahman, until he becomes arrogant against his own self, That person shows this arrogance even against his own self and what's good for his own self, adopting instead falsehoods and or count falsehoods and untruths. Right, that's the generality, and this is where it's going to become tricky, because obviously we're not just explaining, or we're not just translating, we're also adding in the explanation. So the person who can read the Arabic, this is just meant to serve as a support for your individual reading of the book, where you can see, are you kind of on the same page? Can you recognize some of the words? And the person who can't understand the Arabic, then this is just to give you an overview of what is being said, not necessarily a word-for-word translation, especially until we get into the text. When we get into the actual statements of the Salaf, it will be easier to deliver it in a more succinct and concise manner, where the translation is more true to the text without as much freedom and style or form of expression. The point of all of that is that the author says, in general, whoever turns away from these fundamentals that we've mentioned, whoever decides to reject them and seek the truth in other than them, he says, I'm going to use something else to arrive at the truth. And we're going to see the author shortly mentioning what some of those other things might be, whether it be their desires, whether it be their experiences, whether it be their personal taste, whether it be the false evidences that have been established for them, whether it be blind following. These type of things, if they've turned away from the fundamentals that we've mentioned and adopted these things instead in order to arrive at the truth, and these things are that which sprout from desire. The main characteristic that differentiates between the fundamentals of the Salaf and all of the pathways of the people of innovation is that the fundamentals of the Salaf is based on the transmission, the Sunnah. That's why they're called Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. They're the people who have adopted and adhered to and held fast to and clung to the Sunnah, and thus they have been defined as its people. And since they were all on the Sunnah, they became unified because of it. While the thing that is the common quality in all of the people of innovation is that they have, instead of unifying on the Sunnah, desired their particular form of innovation and thus abandoned the Sunnah for it. So the thing that unites them is the fact that they all have desires that they give precedence to over the Sunnah. And since all of their desires were different, but that was the only thing they shared in common, we find them all being separated because of it. And that's why they were described as Ahlul Ahwa or Ahlul Bid'ati wal Furqa. Right? The people of desire, the people of innovation, the people of disunity. Right? The people of separation, division. Because all of their desires is what led them to whatever particular method that they were led to in their innovation. But since all of them had different methods that led them to their innovation, and the only thing that could be used to guide them, or should I say to drive them in their path, was their innovation, it led them to all be divided, even while all being upon innovation. So they're all on innovation, but they're divided in that innovation, and it is the natural result. While Ahl Sunnah is upon the Sunnah, and thus they are united upon that. And so whoever turns away from those fundamentals, you find that person adopting his desires as his direction. And that is what causes him to set his sights on something other than the Quran and the Sunnah. Yarumu siwaha. He targets something else as his motivation, as his lead, as his source of guidance. Whether it be those things that we mentioned, he uses something else as his compass to arrive at his desired result. And the things that he wants to accomplish, because they are based on his desires, they are always things that have transgressed and went outside of the bounds or the boundaries that were set by Allah and his messenger. You never find them satisfied with the boundaries set by Allah and his messenger. And that is because, one, they don't know the boundaries that were set. And so often you find the people of innovation innovating because they didn't know that there was a sunnah in that issue. And they were already sufficed. And that's why you hear the statements of the Salaf saying things like that. Alayka biman qad mat. Upon you is the one who has already died. And whoever is going to follow someone, to let him follow someone who has already died, talking about the Salaf. And their statements like, upon you was what was with them because you've been sufficed. But the people of innovation, because they don't know what the Salaf was upon, you find them following their desires because outside of those boundaries, because they don't know. And the other reason why you might find them, or another reason why you might find them transgressing the limits because of their desires, is because their desires are allowed to run unchecked. And so the desire is always going to keep pulling you forward and forward in the pathway of misguidance. And so there's no way for you to be stopped at the proper limit because your desires can't know what they are. And we see that. Wallahi, we see these things even when we look at the social structures here in the West. How do they regulate what drug is acceptable? How do they regulate how much of the drug is acceptable? How do they regulate how much of fornication is allowable? Is it just holding hands in public? Should we go to PDA? Can it be indecency? Should pornography? All of these things, the desires are going to keep pulling them forward and forward, so they will never be able to stop at the boundaries. So you find them transgressing the boundaries because of ignorance about the boundaries, and that the limits that the things that they were trying to accomplish had already been defined for them. All they had to do was adhere. And then you find them crossing the boundaries as well because the desires keep pulling them forward and forward down the pathways of destruction. And like this, the author is saying, they end up missing their goal. They have their sights set on the target. If you talk to them, they want to be righteous. They want to be good people. They think about themselves as moral individuals. But because of them following their desires, those goals and those lofty ideals that they had set for themselves, you find them missing the mark. They think they're doing a good deed, amilatun nasiba, but in spite of that, tasla naran hamiya, right? They're still going to end up burning in that fire that is extremely hot. قُلْ هَلْ نُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِالْأَخْسَرِينَ أَعْمَالًا الَّذِينَ ضَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Wallahi, it's not to be thought that they don't care. It's not to be thought that they don't have a desire to do good. أَيَطْمَعُ كُلُّ امْرِئٍ مِّنْهُمْ أَن يُدْخَلَ جَنَّةَ نَعِيمٍ. Does every one of them want to be entered into paradises or gardens of enjoyment? Kalla, of course they do. And they have effort. Allah says, say, shall we inform you about those who are the biggest of losers, those who their efforts went astray. So if you want to make sure your efforts are spent in the right way and actually hit the mark, thus you can accomplish the levels of perfection that you wish for yourself and your community, your social systems, your children, your families, your schools, your neighborhoods. If you want the life of an enjoyment in this life and the next, upon you is these fundamentals. Because if not, you're going to miss the mark every time. You're going to put effort in how can we raise the children better? How can we get them out of the gangs? How can we get them off of the drugs? How can we get them out of the streets? And you're going to put a lot of effort into figuring this out. But because your guide was your desires and you turned away from the book and the sunnah, you're going to miss the mark. You're going to miss. And it is inescapable. Should I not inform you about those who are the biggest of losers? Because they spend so much time in trying to get it right. الَّذِينَ ضَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. But all of their efforts went astray in this life, in spite of them thinking that they're doing good things. And so these type of people have turned away from the book and the sunnah. They have missed the mark. And they have missed their chosen goals. They won't accomplish those goals and those purposes that they set for themselves. And they have been, yani aghwa, al-ghawi is to take them away, right? Aghwa, to misguide them, if you will, to deceive them and trick them off of the right path. And thus they were allowed to traverse down the paths of misguidance. And if the path of the sunnah leads to elevation, then the path of misguidance, which direction does it lead? It leads down, arda. It causes him to go down, right? Taradda. He goes down and down. In spite of the things that he wants, you find him constantly descending, constantly debasing himself, constantly lowering himself. And when you go down, then these are it drops you into the mahawi, the pits of destruction. Everything that you do is going to lead to destruction, whether by your own hands to yourself or by the hands of others because of the circumstances you have put yourself in. The arda. So it's led him down that bad path, as opposed to the individual who follows the Quran and Sunnah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida yuslih lakum a'malakum. Oh, you have iman, fear Allah and say a correct statement. He'll rectify your affairs. You'll be successful. Like this, he says it causes him to fall into the pits of destruction. And this is because fima, bisababima, because of what? He has turned away or abandoned from the book of Allah and the sunnah of his messenger. And when he abandoned it, we have to ask ourselves, why did they abandon it? Right? Why would somebody abandon the Quran and the sunnah in spite of knowing that it's the speech of Allah? Because he's talking to the Muslim. He's talking to the Muslim upon innovation. Right? We can see reasonably or theoretically why a kafir would reject it. But why would the Muslim abandon the book of Allah and the sunnah of the messenger? Is that something that is feasible? He says, بِضَرْبِ الْأَمْثَالِ, by setting up examples, by setting up comparisons, by setting up these hypothetical or these inaccurate analogies that they make for themselves to say why we don't need to follow the Quran and the sunnah. Oh, the Quran, it doesn't establish actual intellectual evidence. It's a suggestion. It's metaphoric. It's meant to be a blueprint, but not the actual implementation of it. Come on, Akhi, this is 2024. Those type of things are antiquated. They're outdated. Do you want us to go back and live like they did? Why don't you give up your cell phone if that's the case? All of these type of statements, they set up all of these analogies to allow them to justify for themselves why they reject the Quran and the Sunnah. And they push the two of them away with tons of impossibilities that they try to present. Well, the Quran says this. Don't you see how that's impossible today now, Akhi? Right? Do we really believe that Moses split the Red Sea? Can we really believe these things? Or they try to push it away with things that they want to accomplish that are impossible to accomplish. They try to push it away by establishing points that have no reality to them, that are impossible to be the case. How could the wall want something, ya akhi? فَوَجِدَ فِيهَا جِدَارًا يُرِيدُ أَنْ يَنْقَضَّ. Allah says about Musa and Khadr, they found a wall that wanted to fall. How could a wall want to fall, akhi? The wall is inanimate. How can your hands talk on the day of judgment? How can the earth speak? Akhi, these are impossibilities. You expect me to accept this? A fly falls into my drink, I should put it in and take it out? One of its wings has a sickness, the other has a cure. Akhi, the medicine nowadays, it proves that this is something that's not true. Like this, they constantly try to push away the Quran and the Sunnah with these impossibilities that they set up. وَالْحَيْدِ عَنْهَا. And they try to, when they're cornered, and you find them stuck in a place where they have to accept the Quran and the Sunnah. There's no way around it. The Quran is clear about this issue. The Sunnah is clear about this issue. You tell them, Akhi, this is a clear, direct verse about this topic. What do then? They dodge. They're trapped. They're cornered, so they dodge by saying, but so-and-so said. What about Abu Hanifa? He said this instead of that. What about Imam so-and-so? And that's if they're talking about people who we all value and accept their views to the limits. What about if they talk about someone who we could care less about, like Aristotle or Plato or Socrates? And like this, you find them dodging the Quran and the Sunnah when it's got them in the crosshairs. They dodge it by, what about what so-and-so said? What about this statement? What about that statement? And like this, all of these things that they use to reject and dodge and justify their turning away from the book and the Sunnah, Allah hasn't sent down any authority for it. لم ينزل الله به سلطانا. Allah hasn't sent down any authority for these things to be used in such a fashion. What did Allah tell us to use? أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. Obey Allah, absolutely. Obey the messenger, absolutely. And the people of authority from you, the scholars and the rulers, to the extent that was legislated for them. فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ. And if you differ about something after that, then refer it back to Allah and His Messenger. That is better and a more correct interpretation or a result of what to do. Like this, but they use these things that Allah has not sent down any evidence for. Nor was it something recognized by the people who actually understand what the Quran and the Sunnah mean. None of the people who understand the Quran and the Sunnah have ever recognized these arguments that they put forward. Well, the Quran is suspect in its establishment of evidence, or in its establishment, or the hadith that aren't to a state of undeniability or suspect in their establishment, and thus you can't use them to support knowledge. And they only support conjecture or possibility or more probability than anything else. The people of understanding never understood these interpretations that they come with. They never understood the separation between the Quran when it supports knowledge and when it supports suspicion, or the Sunnah, should I say, when it supports knowledge and when it supports conjecture. None of these things are from our methodology. The people of understanding never recognize such principles. Nor do the people of language. The people of language don't recognize the things that they try to put up to justify their innovation. Oh, this thing is metaphoric. Allah didn't really mean this, He meant that. The people of language say, what is this metaphor that you're talking about? What is this majaz? There's no majaz in the Quran. There's no Allah said this, but He really meant that. Allah said what He meant. And He meant what He said. These things that you're talking about, we don't find them in the language. We don't find that istiwa, to rise above, has come in the language with the meaning to take control. These are two different realities. We don't find that the word hand, yed, when it is in a plural sense, could mean multiple power, because power is a concept. It only comes singular in that regard. So when Allah talks about His two hands, we don't know in the language how this could mean His two powers. That doesn't make any sense to us. And like this, their statements are not recognized by the people who actually understand Ahl al-Ta'wil, the people who have correct interpretation, nor the people who understand the language. Nor has these things ever crossed the heart of anybody who actually has intellect with what evidence necessitates. When you tell me Allah is above, it has never crossed my mind to say, no, He's not, or He's in every place. I can't even fathom that concept. How has it crossed my mind of the old woman in Naysabur to ever think that Allah is in my pocket? Let alone the more despicable things that they say, or that Allah is inside of me and there's nothing between the cloak except Allah, and that the one who has intercourse and the one who has intercourse has been had with, both of them are Allah. What person of intellect has ever thought of such things? Wallahi, it's only the shaitan taking advantage of them. And that's the reason why he says the believer, the person who has intellect, you never find his heart comfortable accepting such things. When he hears these things, he curls up at them. And I know some of these things are not coming across as clear as I would like them to, because you have to know the things that they said to understand the greatness of the author's introduction. And sometimes a person might not know the craziness that the people of innovation say, but that's what we will come to experience in this book. So remember it. When we get to hearing the things that they say, draw back on this statement of the author to say, yeah, I see what he means now. A believer would never feel comfortable even thinking about that, let alone actually seeing it in the open. A believer would never feel comfortable with some of the fahisha, with some of the misguidance that they fall into. They wouldn't feel comfortable thinking about it. So how about when you see the Sufi doing what the Sufi do, from the dancing and the vulgarity and the eating of and the drinking of the things that are impermissible and the acting in these ways? I would never even think, even the kuffar, ya akhi. Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, when they accepted Islam and the Prophet talked about taking the pledge from them about not committing zina, she was dumbfounded. Does a free woman even do such a thing? But then you find later on from these innovative individuals, those who have a day where they turn out the lights and everybody has a free for all, whether it be with their mother or their daughter or their neighbor, male, and these type of things have been justified for them in their minds because of what they turned away from the book and the sunnah and followed behind their desires. But the believer wouldn't think about such wife swapping, these type of indecent parties they have and they call to. The believer wouldn't think about such things, let alone seeing them in the open. He can't fathom that because of how he is with inside the boundaries that were set by the Kitab and the Sunnah. The only person who could be deceived in such a way to where they enjoy and adopt such things is the person istahwadha alayhi shaitan, that the shaitan has taken control of. The person that the shaitan has taken control of. Right? Istahwadha alayhim ash-shaytanu fa-ansahum dhikr Allah. The shaitan has taken control over them and thus caused them to forget the remembrance of Allah. When the believer falls into these sins, dhikr Allah, wastaghfar li dhunubihi wa man yaghfiru dhunuba illa Allah. Right? Those who, when they commit an act of indecency or oppress themselves, they remember Allah. Right? And they seek forgiveness for their sins, and who can forgive sins except Allah? But this wicked individual who has adopted his desires and followed behind them and separated from the path and turned his back to the book and the sunnah, you find the shaitan being able to keep him going behind them. And like this, ahata bihil khudlan. Once the shaitan gets him out in the wilderness and out in those open areas, and he attacks that alone sheep, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the wolf indeed eats the sheep that is outside on its own. When he gets them out there, what does he do? Ahatahum bil khudlan. He encompasses them or surrounds them with treachery and deception. Everywhere they look, they think what that they're seeing is good. They look in front, they think that thing that they're going towards is a good thing. And when they get there, oops, it wasn't. They look to their right, to their left, to their back. They embark on those things. And when they get there, the shaitan, قال إني بريء منك. I'm free of you. إني أخاف الله رب العالمين. I fear Allah, the Lord of all that's created. But you've already ended up in that circumstance. You've already been tricked. You've already fell into that pit where you could have protected yourself. You could have held on tight to that urwatul wuthqa. You could have shielded yourself with that shield that you defend yourself with. You could have fortified yourself. Right? You could have got the barakah in this life if you had followed these principles. But instead, you were deceived when you abandoned it and turned your back to it and followed your desires and traveled down that path of misguidance. That path that the shaitan deceived you with to disobey Ar-Rahman. And even in that expression, to disobey Ar-Rahman, subhanAllah, to disobey Ar-Rahman, when you hear it, it doesn't make sense. SubhanAllah. Why would you not listen to the one who is full of mercy for you? Why would you not listen to the one who cares about you more than you care about yourself? When the expression of the American is always, mother told me there'll be days like this. I should have listened to my mom. Why? Because mother knew and mother loved you and she told you to avoid this. Watch out for those people. Don't do this action. And you didn't listen and you fell into that mistake and you go back on yourself and say, I should have listened. When Allah has more mercy for his slave than that mother does to throw her son into the hellfire or to throw her son into the fire, as the Prophet ﷺ said about that woman breastfeeding, do you think she would ever throw her child into the fire? The Sahaba said no. The Messenger ﷺ, he said, Allah is even more merciful for his slave than that. Why would you disobey him? Wallahi, it's the desires. We ask Allah to allow us to control our desires. Wallahi, it's the desires. That's Allah. Just the wordage of it. The shaitan tricked you into you disobeyed the one who was merciful for you. And thus, what did you do? Kabara nafsaha. Kabara nafsa. He acted arrogant against his own self. He put his own self down. Right? He used this falsehood and these untruths to keep his own self down. By building himself up with the falsehood, he kept himself down from that which the truth would bring for him. And like this, we see the extent and the beauty of the statement of the author in this introduction. And we're not even we're not even a tenth through what he said. I want to read it one more time so the translation, inshallah, will be a little bit more clearer for those who were just looking for the translation. The author, he said, so whoever turns away from that and seeks the truth and other than it, from that which he desires, or he aims at that which is different than it, or besides it, from that which has transgressed it or transpassed or trespassed it or transcended it, or went not transcended, but trespassed it and went past its boundaries, then this individual has erred in his selected target, and it has caused him to go astray. And he has traveled down the pathways of misguidance, and they have caused him to fall low into the pits of destruction. This is due to what he has turned away from the book of Allah and the sunnah of the messenger or his messenger by setting up analogies and rejecting the two of them with all types of impossibilities, and dodging the two of them with the statement, but what did so-and-so say, and what about what was said here? All of these things Allah has not sent down any authority for, nor were they things recognized and acknowledged to be accurate, if you will, from the people of correct understanding or accuracy in their tongue, in their language. Nor was it something that had ever even crossed the heart or come across the heart or cross the mind, if you will, but it's the heart of the individual who has intellect or who comprehends that which the evidence necessitates. And nor has his chest, or nor has the chest of anyone who establishes Tawheed ever been comfortable with even thinking about such things, let alone actually seeing them or doing them in reality. And this is the individual who the shaitan has taken advantage of him and encompassed him in treachery and misguided him to disobeying the one who was most merciful, causing him, or thus that individual has shown arrogance to his own self. by way of this falsehood and untruths, i.e. that he is adopted. And like this, we finish that section of what the individual who follows these fundamentals arrives at and gets, and what is the result of the individual and the condition of the individual who turns away from them. After that, the author is going to begin to talk about some of the causes, some of the aspects that have led them to turn away from the book and the sunnah. If we have the book and the sunnah and the salaf and the sahaba and the salaf, then what are their sources? How do they arrive at their end? And what are the details of this hawa, of this desire, that they all shared an aspect of it, but were differing in the different implications or applications of the desire. So, inshallah, tabi'u ma'ana. That will be next time, inshallah. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Wallahi, we're trying to be at 30 minutes, but قدر الله ما شاء فعل. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.